Welcome. We are here today to discuss Mass Cultural Council's grants for creative individuals. First, I want to thank Rachel Hennigan, who is providing live captions through CART for this webinar. You can turn on captions by clicking live transcript in your Zoom toolbar, or you can open up transcription in a separate window by clicking the stream text URL that we will put in the chat. We also thank American Sign Language interpreters Alicia Brand and Frank Greco, who have joined us today. Welcome to this info session discussing Mass Cultural Council's grants for creative individuals. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Dan Blask. I am a slender, middle-aged Caucasian man with a bald head, glasses, and facial hair. I manage programs for artists and youth at Mass Cultural Council. I'm so grateful that you took the time to join us today to learn about our grant for artists, culture bearers, and creative practitioners. Joining me today are my colleagues Summer Conforto and Kelly Bennett. Together, we support programs for artists at Mass Cultural Council. You'll hear from Summer shortly, and you will likely hear Kelly's voice asking questions from the Q&A throughout the presentation. We are also joined today by my colleague Christian Kelly, who is supporting behind the scenes, and also Charles Baldwin helped prepare us for this presentation. So my gratitude to my colleagues. Christian, a question for you. Does the American Sign Language interpreter need to be pinned, or have you already done that?
They're co-hosts, so I think they should be able to self-pin.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. So the active ASL interpreter, if you could self-pin, we'd appreciate it. So the most important takeaway we would like you to get from this presentation is that we are Mass Cultural Council, and Mass Cultural Council is your state agency supporting the creative and cultural sector. So if you are a Massachusetts artist, it is literally our job at Mass Cultural Council to support you and your work. Today, we're talking about the Grants for Creative Individuals program. And whether it's this grant or a future grant or service, we look forward to having the opportunity to support you and your work. If you have questions during this presentation, please add them to the Q&A feature of Zoom. Some questions we may answer directly within the Q&A feature, and some we may answer live during the presentation. We will do our best to answer all questions, but if we do not get to your question, either due to time restraints or because it is unique to your situation, please reach out to us at creative.individuals@mass.gov. I want to mention too that the session is being recorded and will be published on our YouTube channel very soon. And now I'd like to introduce my colleague, Summer Conforto.
Thanks, Dan. My name is Summer Conforto. I'm the Program Officer for Traditional Arts at Mass Cultural Council. Today's agenda for today, in this presentation, you can learn general information about this grant program. We'll talk about who can apply, how to apply, and learn about the program timeline. Grants for Creative Individuals is our primary grant for artists, culture bearers, and creative practitioners. This program accepts applications from creative individuals in all artistic fields. In the past, some of our programs have been divided by discipline, and you may have had to wait until your specific discipline was up for review. With the Grants for Creative Individuals program, practitioners in all artistic and creative fields can apply every year. And this slide features a recent Mass Cultural Council grantee, Emmanuel Ramirez, playing the guitar. It was taken by Philip Borden. The program mission is to equitably advance creativity throughout the Commonwealth with unrestricted grants to individuals who demonstrate achievement of creative expression and commitment to their artistic cultural practice. Eligibility, who's eligible? Artists, culture bearers, or traditional artists, and creative practitioners in all creative fields or cultural traditions. Visual artists, literary artists, theater artists, performers, film media artists, music artists, designers, drag artists, DJs, cross-disciplinary artists, and more. And this slide includes an underwater photograph of a man appearing to ride his skateboard by Adam Brown. More on eligibility. To apply, you need to be 18 years of age or older, a full-time resident of Massachusetts as defined by the Mass Department of Revenue, not a recent individual grant recipient, so you cannot have received a Mass Cultural Council grant over $2,000 in the past 3 years. But note, this does not include local cultural council grants. Not a full-time student, not a Mass Cultural Council staff member or family of a staff member, not a member of Mass Cultural Council's governing council. If it turns out you are not eligible to apply for this grant this year, please consider filling out the panelist registration form in our grants management system if you would be interested in being considered as one of this program's reviewers.
Thanks, Summer. I just wanted to interject that there may be attendees in this info session who received one of our $5,000 cultural sector recovery grants in 2023. We do have a 3-year wait out period, as Summer mentioned, for individuals who receive direct grants from us. And this would be the 3rd year of that wait out period for recipients of the cultural sector recovery grants. So if you did receive one of those grants, we're glad. We hope it has supported you in your work. You'll be eligible to apply again essentially about a year from now in next year's grant cycle. And I wondered, Kelly, were there any eligibility questions in the Q&A that it would be useful to go over now?
I'm answering one individual question, but we do have a question on priority points that maybe we can raise later in the session.
Okay, thank you. So why don't we continue?
Thanks, Dan. So grants are $5,000. They are unrestricted. You don't need to propose a project in the application, and you don't need to submit a final report later telling us how you used the grant funds. And this slide includes a vibrantly colored painting of a group of various animals in a forest by Andrew Bain. How to apply? What's in the grant application? We ask for a brief personal information such as your contact info and the general category of your work, a brief artist narrative, work samples, and several questions relating to the program's funding priorities. This slide includes a photo depicting Paola Ferrer Ate Ortua in the foreground performing in Laughs in Spanish at Speakeasy Stage Company, and the photo is by Niall Scott Studios. For the artist narrative, keep it brief, only 1,500 characters, including punctuation and spaces. Alternately, you can submit an audio or video version of your narrative, which should be 2 minutes or less in length. And this slide features a brightly hued painting of a bustling street in Colombia by Chelsea Ramirez, also known as Steph X. things to consider. When writing your artist narrative, consider how your work shows your achievement of creative expression and commitment to your artistic or cultural practices. What do we need to know about your work to understand your creative expression and commitment? And this slide features a photograph of artist Shelley Reed working on one portion of a 30-foot wide painting. For the next slide, I'm going to pass it back to Dan.
Thank you, Summer. We also ask for samples of your work in our application, samples of your creative work. This can be a document file, an image file, an audio file, or a video file, or it can be a combination of these types. Please note that the total number of images, pages, or minutes, pages, or image files should not add up to more than 5. The maximum that you can submit is 5 minutes, pages, or image files. And this slide features a photograph of vibrant light art by Alejandro Sina. Kelly, I'm wondering if there were any questions about work samples or about work sample submission?
The work sample submission questions have been answered directly, Dan.
Great, thank you so much. So how will the grants be decided? We use geographic distribution in this process. And what we mean by that is that, actually, I'm going to go over that in just a minute, but that's one of the ways that we decide grants in this process, along with funding priorities, which we'll talk about in just a minute, and scores by reviewers from the Massachusetts creative and cultural community. And again, I just want to mention what Summer mentioned earlier, which is that if it turns out you are not eligible to apply for the grant this year, we would really appreciate your registering your interest to serve as a reviewer for our process. We plan to award approximately 440 to 450 grants of $5,000 each. We anticipate this will be around 10% of the applications. This slide features a still image of a blind baseball player from a film in progress called Blind Ball by Carla Porras. Okay, geographic distribution. This is one of the ways that we decide in the grant selection process. So grants are awarded by county in proportion to that county's application demand. So one thing you'll want to do is make sure that your address is current in our system. You can find it under My Profile after you log in. To give an example of how this will work, let's say that 10% of the applications came from applicants in Essex County. We would then allot approximately 10% of the grants to artists in Essex County. So again, please make sure your address is up to date. And if it changes sometime during the review process, please let us know. This slide features a photograph of an aerial dance performance by Victor Figueroa, and the photograph is by Travis Coe.
Hi, Dan, this is Kelly.
Hi, Kelly.
Hi, I wanted to raise a couple of questions on the work samples.
Great.
First, is it better for someone to submit work of the same or different pieces? In other words, should they all be from one series or of different types of work?
Hi, this is Dan, and that's a great question. It's one that we get often, and in some ways the answer depends on your work. But I will say you have not a lot of work samples to submit, and not a lot of time in your, a lot of space, I should say, in your artist narrative. So It helps if you can keep the application cohesive. That said, if you have several works that together really do a good job of illustrating who you are as an artist and the type of work you do, that might be what we'd recommend. Of course, some of this just depends on what you have. What is your recent work, your current work? But ideally, you would tell a cohesive story with your application in both the narrative and the work samples, while allowing yourself to show some range and some differentiation.
Hi, Dan. This is
Hi.
Kelly. Are AI pieces eligible?
Hi, this is Dan. That is a good question. If AI is used in any part of your process, you should explain that in the artist narrative and make very clear how it was used, and how it fits into your process.
Hi, Dan. This is Kelly. Could you describe what criteria are applied in submitting images that are not directly related to the project, but that demonstrate skill and technique?
Yes. Hi, this is Dan. That's a great question, because it brings up an important point about this program, which is that the grants are unrestricted. We hope they'll help those who receive the grants. We hope that the grants will help them continue to thrive creatively and continue to do their work. And we understand that many times that will include funding a specific project. That said, they are not project proposal grants. They are grants to support the person, to support the artist. So if you intend to use the funds, should you be funded for a particular project, that's great. You do not necessarily need to submit imagery or samples that relate directly to that project, because the samples should indicate what kind of work you do. They should really be more about you as an artist and creator. So it's fine if the images do not align directly with your intended use of the funds.
Hi, Dan. This is Kelly. Can you talk about content and whether there's any requirements on content in terms of subject matter or publishing, that type of thing?
Great. Yeah, thank you, Kelly. This is Dan. There is no content requirement. There are no content restrictions. The program does not fund only a particular type of content. So it doesn't have to be Massachusetts-based content, though that is completely acceptable and encouraged if that's the work you do. Work can be published. It can be unpublished. It can be complete. It can be incomplete. It does need to be, if it is complete, it does need to have been completed within the past 5 years, so relatively recent work. But content-wise, there is not any limitation to what you can submit. We ask for work that that indicates who you are and the work you do as a creative individual.
Hi, Dan. This is Kelly. Another question about documentation of work. If someone was a visual artist, for instance, and there's a 5 work sample limit, can they fill multiple JPEGs with like as diptychs or triptychs so that they can show more imagery in the required 5 work samples?
Hi, thanks. This is Dan. That's another great question. Yes, you can subdivide your image file, especially if you want to show a detail and perhaps the whole work. Just keep in mind, the more divisions, the smaller each will be, and it may get a little visually confusing if they are too subdivided for the reviewers to really grasp. But that is acceptable. It's 5 image files, but there could be multiple images in each file if you so choose.
Hi, Dan. How old can the work?
Hi, thanks. This is Dan. So the work, if it's completed work, it needs to have been completed within the past 5 years. But if it's work that is, let's say you started it 25 years ago, but you're still working on it, or you have still worked on it within the past 5 years, then it would still be eligible to submit. Okay. Should we move on? So funding priorities. I mentioned that one of the ways that we decide who receives the grant is through funding priorities. What do we mean by funding priorities? So if you meet any of these funding priorities, you'll receive a modest ratings advantage in our review process. But I want to clarify that funding priorities are distinct from eligibility. If you're eligible to apply, we encourage you to do so. And that we encourage that whether you meet some or even any of the funding priorities. If you happen to not meet any of the funding priorities, we still encourage you to apply if you meet our eligibility requirements and you are interested in applying. Funding priorities are just one part of the review process, and they are not meant to dissuade anyone from applying. So I want to mention what those funding priorities for this program are. Applications will be modestly prioritized if the applicant has not received a direct grant from Mass Cultural Council for the past 6 years. So LCC grants do not count for this calculation. An applicant will be prioritized if the applicant is in a group we call historically underfunded, and there are 4 categories that we include in the historically underfunded moniker. The first is applicants who identify as BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color, Latina, Asian, Native American, Pacific Islander, and all other ethnicities of color. Second, applicants who identify as having a disability. Third, applicants whose creative process has been limited by poverty. To receive this funding priority, you will need to provide proof of participation in one of the anti-poverty programs listed on our website, which includes SNAP, Medicaid, or MassHealth, SSI, and others. The full list is in our guidelines. And fourth, applicants who are veterans of the United States Armed Forces. The final funding priority includes artists who meet our definition of a traditional artist or culture bearer. And my colleague Summer will talk more about that in a moment. This slide features an abstract painting by Perry Hall.
Thanks, Dan. So when we are talking about traditional artist or culture bearer, this is the definition that we're using. For this program, the definition of traditional artist or culture bearer includes individuals whose creative or artistic practice sustains a living tradition within a specific community and can be reflective of that community's aesthetics, practices, values, and or their beliefs. Their community may be defined by ethnic, geographic, tribal, spiritual, or trade craft-based heritage. Most commonly, but not always, traditional arts are learned orally or by observation, passed down from generation to generation, rather than in an institutional or academic setting. For example, if you look at the image on this slide of work by Aquinnah Wampanoag artist Donald Wittes, you can see a form of quahog shell or wampum art that has its basis and significance in the artist's Aquinnah Wampanoag community and heritage. Traditional artists or culture bearers may have previously applied for our traditional arts apprenticeships or the artist fellowships in traditional arts. Using our grants management system to apply, your email address will be your username. Once you're logged in as an individual, you'll find the application under current opportunities.
just want to interject that once you start a draft of your application, you can save it and come back to it later. So you don't need to finish it all in one sitting. And you can start the moment this info session is done, and save as you go and come back to it later.
Our advice is to start early, later in the application process, especially on deadline day. There are many people trying to apply at once, and our online systems sometimes experience delays. It's better to start your application early since we cannot accept late applications. And this slide includes a painting of two women potting plants by Mrinalika Sivakumar. And I will pass it back to Dan.
Thanks, Summer. This is Dan speaking. Wanted to share a few facts about the grant. It is considered taxable income. So if you receive a grant, you will need to report it in your 2026 tax filings. I do believe that the State Comptroller's Office will send a 1099 form for grant recipients early in the calendar year, but that is also downloadable, and Mass Cultural Council can help you find the way to do that when the time comes. In order to receive the grant, you will need to fill out contracts paperwork. And I want to mention, since this is new within the last 2 years, that one form in that contract paperwork does need to be printed out and taken to a public notary to be notarized and then mailed back to us. So just something to keep in mind. If you receive public benefits and you receive this grant, the income from that grant could have an impact on eligibility to your benefit program. So we recommend checking the rules of your particular benefit program. But I want to note that we do offer benefits counseling to our grants recipients that receive public benefits. So if you do receive public benefits and receive one of our grants, we can connect you to a counselor who can tell you how it might impact those benefits. Finally, I want to mention that state grants are subject to be intercepted for past due state debts. Please note that the Intercept program is a state requirement outside of Mass Cultural Council's control. This slide depicts a photo shoot that was directed and styled by Naji Jocelyn. Kelly, I wonder if there were any questions that might make sense to address now?
Yes. So if we could talk a moment about the priority points, there was a question in which someone wanted to know if you could share how significant the weighting is overall, particularly for someone that's in a marginalized community, so they can understand whether it makes sense to apply. And also, do you track or share statistics on the demographic breakdown of past grantees? So it's
Right,
a two-part question.
Those are great questions. So this is Dan speaking. So we have not finalized the exact weighting for this year, but generally the reviewer score will be well over half, but likely more, significantly more than half of the weighting, and then the resulting scores will be divided between all of those funding priorities. So it is significant. It often makes the most difference when it comes to, let's say, the final tied scores in a particular county. It may help break those ties in that final group of scores that are fairly close. The funding priorities may there really make a difference. And then we do have We do have past demographic information. I would recommend, as far as what how the funding priorities, the data from those funding priorities and how they impacted the past 2 grant years. So I would recommend you get in touch with us after this info session, and we can direct you in the right way. Thank
This
you.
is a question for Dan and Summer. Would teaching classes to communities, libraries, senior centers be an ancient art or craft be eligible?
Summer, did you want to jump in?
So I'm sorry, Kelly, would the teaching of classes?
Yeah, be considered an ancient art? Would it
I
be eligible?
I think it would depend on what art form the person is teaching. And again, I'm happy to discuss with anybody who's interested in providing any details about their particular art form. But for instance, if it were a photography class, we might not consider that as meeting our funding priority for traditional artists. But if it were a class that was teaching the bomba, the drum, to people within their communities, that would be something that we could consider for the funding priority.
And thank you, Summer. And just to reiterate, whether or not you end up meeting that funding priority, teaching artists are eligible to apply, so we hope you'll strongly consider applying to this grant, whether or not the funding priority is an exact fit.
Hi, Dan, this is Kelly. Can you talk about the review process and if the artists' names are blinded?
All right, thanks, Kelly. This is Dan. So it is not an anonymous review, but we do have a conflict of interest policy. So we instruct our reviewers go through an orientation process, and they are instructed in every aspect of the review, and that includes the conflict of interest. And so if we determined that there was a conflict of interest or a reason for that reviewer not to review a particular application, we would reassign that one. So we tend to gather a variety of backgrounds and expertise for our reviewer pool, and we also try to match that expertise with applications in that same creative field. Kelly, did that answer most of that question?
Yes. Dan, could you remind people when the deadline is and when recipients will be notified?
Great. Thank you very much for that question. That brings us to this next slide. What is the timeline? So the program is open now and it's live now. The deadline is October 28th, 2025 at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. As Summer mentioned earlier, unfortunately, we cannot accept late applications under any circumstance, so we strongly encourage you to start early. We anticipate notifying applicants of their award status by late February. And then we anticipate that grants for those who are recipients of the grants would arrive in April or May of 2026. And as a reminder, there is no final report necessary in this program. But we do appreciate when past recipients keep in touch and let us know what they're up to. I wanted to mention a few other opportunities that artists and creative individuals should know about from Mass Cultural Council. So along with our statewide grant programs, we also fund local cultural councils throughout the state in every city and town. And those councils then give grants to support local cultural projects. So it is completely fine to apply to the grants for creative individuals, but also apply to your local cultural council to support a local project that benefits the local community. The deadline to apply for the local cultural council grants is October 16th. We have an online resource to support Massachusetts artists called ArtSake. We'd encourage you to visit periodically. Every week, we round up resources and calls to artists and residencies and contests and other opportunities for artists. Generally publish that every Tuesday. So we'd encourage you to periodically visit ArtSake. You can also find Creative Space. If you're looking for an artist studio, or say you're looking to list your studio, you can do that on ArtSake. And we have other resources as well, other grants from other funders. So we hope you'll visit. We have a site called higherculture.org. It's a database of cultural employment opportunities. And finally, if you don't already receive our e-newsletter, Artist News, we highly encourage you to sign up. You can sign up on our homepage at massculturalcouncil.org. It will share all news, dates, and deadlines for Massachusetts artists. This slide includes an abstract painting of a web of blue and purple hues by Sarah Sutro. And Kelly, I wonder if there are questions in the Q&A that we can answer now.
Dan, how many grants does the Mass Cultural Council anticipate giving out with this program?
Hi, thank you. This is Dan. We anticipate around 450. That number could change somewhat. It could be a little less than that. It could even possibly be a little bit more than that. But we anticipate it'll be around 450 grants of $5,000 each, and that will likely turn out to be about 10% of the application pool.
If someone is a founder of a dance company, can they use the grant money for a new project that the organization is pursuing this year?
Hi, this is Dan. So the grants are unrestricted, and yes, they can use them to support the work they do, even if that's organizational work. The real question in this case would be the work that they discuss and submit in the application. So we know many creative individuals wear multiple hats, and we honor that. But we would ask that you do not submit primarily organizational work as the samples for the application. So I think you mentioned dance company. If you are also a choreographer, submitting your work as a choreographer is more in line with the goals of this program, supporting creative individuals, rather than submitting work samples that are more sort of administrative or based on the organization. So, and we're always happy to field questions or discuss individual circumstances when it comes to this. But it's a program primarily meant for individuals doing individual work. That said, again, the grants are unrestricted, and we trust the recipients to use them in the way that best serve their work.
Hi, Dan. A question on eligibility and prior funding. Could you go over again what is not eligible in terms of receiving funds and the years?
Sure. Hi, this is Dan. So this can get a little confusing because there's an eligibility requirement that if you've received a direct grant over $2,000, in the last 3 years, you are not eligible to apply. And that is separate from the funding priority, where there's a slight ratings advantage if you have not received direct funding from us in 6 years. So recipients of our grants for creative individuals from last year, that's fiscal year 25, would not be eligible to apply yet this year. They'd still be in their three-year wait out period. Recipients of the grants for creative individuals from 2004 likewise would not be eligible to apply. They're still in their 3-year wait out period. And then individuals who received our cultural sector recovery grant in 2023, they would not be eligible to apply yet. They still have 1 more year in their 3-year wait out period. But grant recipients from 2023 would be eligible in about a year from now in the fiscal year 27 cycle. So we encourage you to check back then. And again, if you are interested in serving as a reviewer for this program, we'd love to have your perspective. So if you received a grant from us earlier than 2023, let's say an artist fellowship in 2022, or we had some smaller COVID recovery or COVID relief grants in 2020 and 21. So you will be eligible to apply, and we hope you'll look into it. So you'll notice on this slide a detail of a large-scale painting by Shelley Reed, and also our email, creative.individuals@mass.gov. And if there are things that we have not covered during this info session or any other more specific questions you'd like to ask us, please feel free to contact us via email or phone, or we also, if you go to Mass Cultural Council's agency dates, we also have a number of small group office hours, online office hours events, where small groups of individuals are encouraged to sign up and ask their questions of us that way. It's optional. They're not necessary to attend. They're not, but if you have questions that would best be asked in a small group setting, please feel free to sign up for one of our office hour meetings. Kelly, were there any questions from the Q&A?
Yes. Dan, could you talk about people who work in more than one type of work? Like, for instance, if they do poetry and they do music, how would they go about thinking about their application and
Great.
what they could submit?
Great. Hi, this is Dan. So, yeah, so we do have a multidisciplinary discipline as a discipline category, and artists who work in more than one form, we encourage them to lean on that in their application. You can choose multidisciplinary, or you can decide if you've been doing one of the types of work with more regularity or more intensity of late. You could just choose to apply, say, as a poet, and apply in literature and submit poetry. But yes, it is completely fine to submit multiple types of work. And what we'll tend to do is find reviewers who have backgrounds in multiple types of work, and our multidisciplinary reviewers will review the pool of multidisciplinary applicants. Kelly, did that answer the question?
It did. Thank you. Here's a question around what determines the selection of an applicant receiving a grant other than the reviewers and the numbers per county. Could you answer that?
Yeah, so the geographic distribution, right, that essentially we devise through that process a number of applications that will be awarded in each county. All applications are scored by our independent reviewers, and then that score may be adjusted or will be adjusted somewhat by the funding priority, which will add a modest additional score to applicants who meet those funding priorities. So it's a slight recalibration to the reviewers' scores and will affect the rankings in each county.
Hi, Dan, this is Kelly. Could you talk a little bit about local cultural council grants and this grant and whether someone is eligible if they've received local cultural council grant funding?
Great. Yes, and then I wonder, Summer, would you mind jumping in and talking about the tribal cultural council grants after I talk for a minute about LCC grants? So you can apply for both. Receiving a local cultural council grant would not get in the way of you're also receiving a grant for Creative Individuals Award. They are slightly different programs. They are different programs. The LCC grants really are based on projects and projects that benefit the local community. And the grants for Creative Individual Awards are about supporting the artist in general. But there's a lot of crossover there, and we encourage you to apply for both if your work meets both programs. Yep.
And I can speak a little bit more about the Tribal Cultural Council program. It's an expansion of the local cultural council program, but supports Native American and Indigenous communities by providing funds for tribal governments to grant to projects that provide community benefit. And you can take a look at that program if it's relevant to you on our website. There are currently 4 tribal cultural councils participating in this program.
The grants from the local cultural council program and the tribal cultural council program tend to be smaller amounts than the $5,000 grants for Creative Individuals Awards, but it depends on the size of the local cultural council. So there may be some variation there as well.
Hi, this is Kelly. Are the reviewers that are looking at the work in this program professionals in each style of the art?
Great, thank you. This is Dan. Are they professionals in each style of the art? I would say we will certainly have professionals amongst the reviewers, but there may be a range of there will likely be a range of individuals. Some will be past grantees, some will be arts administrators at organizations in Massachusetts. Some will be other professionals in the arts, but we will create a well-rounded. We'll work to create a well-rounded pool of reviewers that is reflective of the Massachusetts cultural and creative community.
Hi, Dan, this is Kelly. Can you talk about the application and whether or not household income is a requirement that applicants need to reveal?
Thank you for that question. Hi, this is Dan. There is no requirement that household income be disclosed. There's no question having to do with household income in the actual application. Any funding priority question is optional to answer as well. So, or rather optional to sort of opt in. So There aren't income questions when it comes to the funding priority for individuals who participate in anti-poverty programs, but there is a verification process. So you could upload an image of an EBT card if you participate in SNAP. So there is a verification process where you would be sharing, uploading a card or a letter or a verifying document that shows that you do indeed participate in that anti-poverty program. But again, not literally income-based questions.
This is Kelly. Two-part question. Is there a budget proposal in the application? And how will the money be spent?
I thank you. This is Dan. There is no budget proposal aspect to the application, and we encourage recipients to spend the funds supporting their creative work, but we don't include rules as to how applicants spend that funding. So, we know that sometimes that means supporting your technology or supporting your space needs. And we understand that doesn't always go directly into a specific project, but we hope that it will be used to help you continue to do your creative work and your creativity to thrive.
Hi, Dan, this is Kelly. Do reviewers have access to applicants' age or disability status?
Thank you. Hi, this is Dan. No, the reviewers do not have access to the applicant's age or disability status unless either of those details is discussed in the artist narrative portion. So an applicant who discusses either their disability status or their age, obviously the reviewer would see that in the when they're reviewing the artist narrative.
This is Kelly. And this is for Summer. The question about the teaching classes was specifically related to the art of Pisanki, the ancient traditional art of creating designs on eggs using wax and dyes. So wondering if that's considered a traditional art.
Yes, yes, it's always helpful to hear the art form, so thank you. But yes, we would consider something like that, traditional art form. And I would recommend if anybody has questions about whether their art form, would meet our funding priority for traditional artists or culture bearer, to please reach out to me. You can find our email collectively here, creative.individuals@mass.gov, and I'm happy to have a conversation with folks.
Hi, this is Kelly. These are questions related to income. Will the income requirement be looked at or considered? And then if someone doesn't participate in a state or federal anti-poverty program but struggles with poverty, is there any consideration there?
Hi, this is Dan. So we're always looking at our grant guidelines. We've published the guidelines for this year, and so we do not anticipate making changes for this particular year, but we are always happy to receive feedback and frequently do make changes from year to year in what we're including as our funding priorities, how we're including them. So we welcome that feedback. I'm not sure if that fully answers that first question, but to the second one, Kelly, can you remind me of the second question, how exactly it was phrased?
I'm sorry, I can't.
Okay.
I don't remember.
I
Let me
believe
think.
that it had, yes, I believe it had to do with not participating in one of the anti-poverty programs.
That's correct.
But still receiving that funding priority. So, I mean, the funding priority is based on participation in one of those programs. So there's not a sort of third way to receive the priority. That said, those kinds of struggles you can consider, including your struggle as a creative individual as relates to poverty status in your artist narrative, and discuss how that has been part of your trajectory as an artist. All artist narratives will be read by the reviewers, and so I'd encourage that, and then I'd encourage you to, if you wish, and then I'd encourage you to, if you have feedback about our process, to let us know.
Dan, can you take a moment to talk about the reviewers and the conflict of interest and recusal process?
Sure. So this is Dan. So, so we ask our reviewers, first of all, we go over our conflict of interest policy, which is that the state considers it a conflict of interest for a reviewer to review someone's application if there is a family relationship between the two of them, if there is a contractual relationship between the two of them, let's say one has hired the other or has a contract with the other, and we consider it a conflict of interest if there is an adversarial relationship between a reviewer and an applicant. And so those are situations where we would absolutely require that the reviewer be recused from voting on that application. And we go over that policy with our reviewers during their orientation. There may be other circumstances where a reviewer, when we share with them their applications to review, we ask them at the beginning of that process to go through the list and look and see if there are any individuals for which they have a conflict as the state defines it. But we also advise them that there may be circumstances where there's a familiarity with an individual, and it would be better, either personally or professionally, for them not to review that application, and they can choose to recuse themselves in that case, or they can choose to contact us for advice and talking the situation through. So there sometimes is some back and forth in that process. As I said, we do have those circumstances that we absolutely consider a conflict of interest, but then there's also a range of circumstances where, though it may not meet our definition of a conflict of interest, it still may be better that the reviewer be reassigned, or the application be reassigned to a different reviewer. As I said, there's some back and forth and some conversation involved. So we're at an hour. Kelly, is there a final question we can answer?
Yes, is this a reimbursement grant if the project is April 2026? Are funds available?
Got it. Thank you. This is Dan. So it's not based on projects. The grant will arrive sometime in early calendar year 2026. So we think perhaps April or May is likely when the grants will arrive. If you've already incurred costs for a project at that point, I guess it is reimbursement in that case, but it's really considered a direct grant, not a reimbursement grant. And we hope that it will support work that's ongoing, whether that's costs that have already been incurred or those that are still to come related to your creative work. But again, we consider it a direct grant, not a reimbursement-based grant.
Hi, Dan. There's a couple of questions around the funding priorities, and let's go with the first one. There's some disappointment that among the priorities that a funding priority is not designated for senior citizens. Could you talk about that decision?
Sure. Hey, this is Dan speaking. We reconsider the funding priorities every year. When we first designated them, and when we consider them each year, we try to look at where we have seen the highest level of inequities historically, and we try to address those with the funding priorities. we hear you about designating seniors as funding priority. I will say that though we don't currently have a funding priority for seniors, we do ask that applicants delineate their career stage in the application. And the reason that we do that is toward the end of the process, we might find ourselves having some tied scores at, say, the final grant slot. And when we have, and sometimes that's a very large number of tied scores at the final slot. In that case, we look at those questions, and that includes the career stage. So early career, your emerging artist, mid-career working artist, or an experienced artist. I can't remember the exact, I think it was 30 years. Anyway, they're in our guidelines, and you'll find it in the application. But the career stage, we will look at the number of applications we've received in each career stage. And if we notice that the number of awards already delineated, if there is any inequity in terms of which career stage is perhaps lagging behind, we will break the tie in the direction of that career stage. So we use that question along with the discipline category question as a way of breaking ties so that we get as close to the same percentage of grants in each of those disciplines and in each of those career stages as we have percentage of applications. And Kelly, maybe one more question?
Yeah. Hi, Dan, this is Kelly. It's also to do with funding priorities, and in terms of the geography and demographics, does it get further broken down by county and district? For example, would an individual of a marginalized group living in an area that is predominantly serving a dominant group get further priority over an area that serves a larger collective of the same marginalized group?
Hi, thanks. This is Dan. There isn't a further delineation of the kind that you're referencing, but what sometimes will happen is that the funding priorities will have kind of a different impact based on the particular county. So something like what you're referencing may happen naturally, but we don't do a further analysis of the kind that you mentioned. Okay, so we're at an hour. I just want to thank you all for attending this info session. Please reach out to us with questions. We appreciate you and the work you do, and I want to thank again my colleagues from Mass Cultural Council, as well as Rachel Hennigan for the live captions, and Frank Greco and Alicia Brand for providing the American Sign Language interpretation. We will publish a video of this presentation on our YouTube channel in the upcoming days. And again, we just so appreciate the work you do creatively and making our state a more vibrant place. Thank you.